Awais currently serves as a lecturer at the National College of Arts, Lahore, one of Pakistan's most prestigious institutions. In addition to his academic role, he has actively participated in symposia and workshops on heritage conservation and served on the executive committee of the Institute of Architects Pakistan, Rawalpindi, Islamabad Chapter. Awais's diverse experiences have expanded his knowledge of global heritage practices and reinforced the importance of public perception in architecture, contributing to a well-rounded approach to the management of built environments. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome architect Awais Aqdus to the stage.
Thank you. This is for next and big.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you so much for having me over here. I feel honored to be presenting at the IAPEX 2025 Karachi chapter. I hope that what I'm about to present to you, you guys find quite interesting. Thank you for the introduction. Today I'm going to be talking a bit more towards sustainability and how the importance of sustainability for our future developments. What we need to understand is that with the way that the world is actually developing and we're progressing, we're kind of actually forgetting how the impact that we are having on the earth and our environment and the ecology. We need to take that into consideration now as well. Otherwise, you can see the implications of it with the impact of climate change and actually even the effects that are happening when it comes to the local masses. So my presentation is titled By the People, for the People. It is an exploration on how you can actually create a sustainable development through community living and community development itself. So we have seen that the field of architecture has been developing quite rapidly in recent times. This technological advancement has helped us to build much faster. It has helped us to build much bigger. It is helping us to, we're racing towards the skies now. But, and this is actually required as well, because if you see in the past 100, 200 years, our population has exponentially increased. We're now almost touching 8 billion people, and we need a way to accommodate our ever-growing population. But the thing is that we are unfortunately, while doing this development, we're forgetting some quite crucial aspects, such as our ecology, the environment, and the impact that we're having on those. And even the building materials that we're using, they are in limited quantities. There is a certain restriction that is existing because of that. Other than that, I think that, even if you take the past 5 years or so, we've seen the world change quite drastically. We've suffered through a global pandemic. We've seen this global recession that has taken place. There are, there's a lot of things happening that, we need to now that we need to take into consideration in order to actually, have a more prosperous future development. So if you look at the problem that we're actually facing, our issue becomes that how can we actually then design and construct in a way that our our development costs are reduced, it becomes inexpensive, and it is done in a more sustainable manner. The reason for actually studying this aspect is that if you notice the way that the problems that the masses are actually facing, it is a financial one. Unfortunately, if you, on a global scale, you will notice that, the top 1% are actually controlling the top 50% of the finances, whereas the bottom 1% of the world, the bottom 50% of the world only has 1% to deal with. And in recent times, and you can even see this in Pakistan happening, that it is creating this massive issue of how to sustain yourself. One of the things that is quite necessary for us is to have our own home. And having homeowners or creating independent households where people do not have to worry about where they don't have to worry about, having a place to stay, having a shelter upon their heads, is becoming increasingly more difficult. Now, that is one aspect, serving the masses. The other aspect that we need to look into, again, as I mentioned before, is the finite of materials and how we can actually approach this issue. So, I've been talking about the global conditions. Our people are resilient. And if you look at the history of the world, we've been through a lot. You go back 100 years, there was a massive pandemic that also took place at that time. We've been through massive diseases, we've been through world wars, but we've still come out of it. If you take the Second World War, that was a time that had a drastic impact on the world. And but after that, if you notice that, people did come out prosperous. If you take America, for example, over there the industry bloomed, and people were coming towards household ownerships, having their own homes, and this is that is what the American dream then became. But in recent times, if you look at the past couple of decades, with the economic recession that has happened and the way that the COVID pandemic hit, we see this decline that has started to happen. Now, I have mentioned only America, but this is something that has happened globally as well. So in order to understand that what the world is actually going through, I've indicated three indicators to use as a standard, which is economic, political, and ecological. And on these bases, we're going to be looking at how, what has been happening. Now, before I go on to the next slide, one thing that you need to understand is how the world has been divided between the global north and the global south. The global north are basically the countries which are the global leaders who are leading in industry, in trade, whereas the global south are the nations which are basically the developing nations. They are the ones that are following the lead of the global north. So, but as I mentioned before, this is not only something that the developing nations are, an issue that the developing nations are facing, it is something that is happening globally. If you compare the factors that are happening between the global north and the global south, they're quite similar now. If look at the economic aspect, the pandemic has actually affected the industry quite drastically. You see inflation reach an all-time high in that area, something that was already happening in the global south. Politically, recently, we've seen this instability and unrest. Thank you. Instability and unrest that has been taking place. For the global south, this thing is mostly happening internally, whereas ecologically, we do know that that the global north is quite they promote, you know, environment friendliness and have those stringent laws, but the way that they're able to do that is actually to have the ecologically damaging processes of the industry happening in the global south, where the legislation or and the implementation of rules is comparatively lenient. So you can see that, you know, unfortunately, Pakistan does fall in the global south. If you look at these three indicators and put them specifically towards Pakistan, we are suffering quite drastically. Economically, you can see that our growth rate of our GDP has, you know, gone drastically down. Though it might seem that our income has increased, but the inflation rate is so high that it is actually more in the negative. And same thing with our global trade. Politically speaking, Pakistan has barely seen any stability. We're a nation which has gone through multiple martial laws, have extreme internal conflicts that are going on. Our instability with our neighboring countries is also quite frightening. And if you look at it ecologically, with the deforestation and the pollutions that are happening, you can see that, you know, how we're having issues such as seasonal flooding, and smog has become quite a major issue when it comes to Lahore. Now, how is this actually impacting the development sector? When inflation is so high and our household incomes are so low, it makes it extremely difficult for people to actually think about household ownership. Now, the thing is that this is how it is affecting the masses. You would ask the question that, you know, we still see a lot of construction happening within Pakistan with these massive structures that are going on, that are being erected. If you simply, you know, when we drove from the airport yesterday, you know, there were so many buildings that were under construction even right now. But the thing is that it is happening at a commercial level, but the issue lies where the masses are concerned. People cannot think about owning their own homes. So what is the answer when we are talking about affordable home ownership combined with a sustainable way of actually doing it? The answer just may lie in vernacularism. For this, I would like to present a project that I was a part of. The project's title is the Singida Earth House model. It was a model house that we actually constructed in Tanzania. So for those who don't know, Tanzania is a country in Africa. It lies just below the equator. And because of that, you don't have that much of a variation within the country, but you have long dry spells and short extreme rainfall periods. The project was located within Singida city. Singida city is the administrative capital of Singida region, which lies in the very center of Tanzania. Now Singida becomes quite important because it actually becomes the central point of the entire nation, and all activities that are actually happening are happening through this area. The location of the site itself was right next to Lake Singida. So how was this project approached? Our approach to this project was that we wanted to make the construction as low cost as possible, using as many local materials as possible. So it actually started with how we constructed the brick. We redefined the dimensions of the brick and how it was actually manufactured on site. The brick itself was sun-dried brick, and you can see that the dimensions were about 4 inches wide, 12 inches thick, with a height of 3.5 inches. We kept about half an inch of thickness for the mortar course. So the way that the bricks were actually arranged is actually quite a unique way. You can see in in the plan of how each course actually was different. And because of this arrangement, there were, you had fenestrations within the walls, which allowed for ventilation, which allowed for light to pass through. The elevation shows that actually how you can see these vertical openings. It is actually these areas that all the light penetration and ventilation was happening through. For ahead, we will see images where you can see how this actually turns out as well. So these are all the works that were actually done. All of this was done on site. Now, if you see that every single process that was done from material sourcing to the construction, it did not require much of any external elements. And so you can actually, this project was actually showing that how you could have the entire construction and material sourcing process being done on site through local resources. And that is something that becomes quite important, because if you can actually reduce even the distance that material has to travel, that also has quite a massive impact on the carbon footprint that the structure would eventually have. So these are the materials that we used. Granted, corrugated steels is a manufactured material, but that is the only thing that was used that was manufactured. And this was also only used for the construction of the roof itself, in order to have some protection from the external elements. Other than that, we got the soil from the site as well. All three different types of soils were sourced from the site itself. The sand that was used was basically the topsoil. We sieved through it, and it was fine enough to be used as sand. Talking about the clay, it was quite an interesting thing for me that in order to source the clay, we actually looked for termite mounds. That is actually what told us where high concentrations of clay were, and then we excavated that from the land. And then laterite. Laterite is the coarse kind of soil which has stones within it. For fiber, we used rice husk. Rice husk basically actually was the joining material for the bricks themselves. For the foundation, so that we could have a strong foundation on which the structure could be erected, we used stone. The cow dung was there to actually improve the viscosity of the material itself, so that it was more workable. The ash was used as a deterrent for all your insects, and because, as I said, that on the side when we were looking for clay, we actually looked for termite mounds. Now that means that termites are quite abundant in that land. So in order to deter the building from deteriorating through insects such as termites, ash was introduced into the mixture as well. Then we had wood, corrugated steel, and then lime powder. So these are just a couple of images that I want to show you of the site and the process that we actually went through. As you can see in the image on the right, on the left, that all the processes were being done on site. Over here, the excavation right now was being done to find clay. At the back, you can see that the sun-dried bricks were being made on site. And on the right, in the background, is the building itself. The internal walls of the structure were all rammed earth, because then the walls were themselves protected from external elements, and hence the longevity of those walls was much more as compared to if you had direct sunlight and wind actually hitting that surface. And all of these, first we did our experimentation in order to understand what percentage of the material components need to be added together in order to get the best kind of material. So one of the things that, so we were doing processes such as clay test. Now in a clay test, what basically was being done was different percentages of the soils were being added. We were making about balls which were about 2 inches in diameter. They were allowed to dry a bit and then dropped from a height of about 6 to 7 feet on a hard surface. Now the deformation is actually what told the percentage of the clay that was present. So the more that it deformed, the more clay was in it, and if it broke, then the percentage of the clay was actually less. Once we were able to figure out the best percentages of the soil and all the materials that had to be used, then this is how we were actually constructing the bricks. We had a mold in which our mixture was pressed in and then was dried under a shade. Initially, we did not have a shade, and what that actually did was it dried out the top surface and introduced cracks and actually weakened the brick itself. So we understood that the place where the bricks are being dried needs to be ventilated, but you cannot do it using direct sunlight. For the woodworks, you can see the kind of wood that is being used. Now this wood is completely naturally sourced. Because of this, the size of the timber that we were able to get was not that long. It was only about 6 to 8 feet that each piece would be. So using half-lap dovetail joints, we were able to actually join the different pieces of timber together in order to create our beams. The beams which were used as a ring beam to actually hold the roof together with the structure. Our doors and lintels and trusses to actually support the roof itself, all of these works were done using wood. Now, it's not just about the structure. We also incorporated the landscaping within this. And within the landscape, the way that it was actually done was to actually have our land actually sort of give back to the community as well, where the trees and the plants that were planted, they were edible. We had fruit-producing trees, and even you can see that I've written that we made a water channel. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find a proper photograph for you guys to see, but the water channel was designed in a way that when the rains would actually happen, it would actually collect in that water channel and would actually take the water into a reservoir right next to the wind barrier. And that water would actually be, be the water source for all the plants. We did composting as well, which was used for fertilization of the landscape. Then actually came the final finishing with the plaster and the flooring and the foundation. In this image, you can see how the foundation has been done. We kept the foundation relatively a bit high, in order to, again, protect against termites. Now, even in the plastering process, the only thing that was done was that we removed the rice husk, the fiber process, in order to have a more smooth consistency, and the plastering was basically done again to protect against the external elements and such as erosion. For the flooring, first the ground was compacted, after which we had stone crush that was put, leveling the entire ground, and then on top of that we had laterite, and laterite was then we used the same process such as rammed earth in order to make the floors, and having the crushed stone at the bottom actually allowed that there was this layer of protection from the natural ground. Now comes the other aspect. Actually, right now I've been talking about all the materials and the construction process, but one of the very important part is actually the labor itself, and the cost that actually goes towards labor. For this project, since this project was a model housing, it was mostly done by us, where we had 3 team leaders and 12 volunteers that were working. But the aim was actually eventually that when such a model comes into being, it is the community itself that starts building these structures. For that, we had actually hired 6 workers, and these workers were not people who were construction workers. They did not have the knowledge of construction, but they were the people who were, working the farms or doing random odd jobs around. They were actually located in the neighborhood. So these weren't people that were coming specifically to this area to work on this project. Eventually, what the aim was that the people themselves would be able to do the processes and develop the community in such a way. The processes of the project were simple enough that the people were quite easily able to understand them and can even implement them themselves, teaching their peers on how the construction of the brick is happening, or how the masonry is being executed. The fun part of this was that we still, even though that we had hired help, the neighbors of the site were still quite curious as to what was happening, and every now and then they would end up coming, looking, overseeing the progress of the project, and just seeing how everything was done. If you look at the image of actually the child and the father, they were so interested in how the bricks were being made that they themselves wanted to get involved. So whatever spare time they would actually have, they would just come and spend on the site with us. And we were actually we had quite a nice time with them. The women generally, would be bringing us refreshments from their home, since, it was actually quite hot in Tanzania. Now, like I mentioned before, the labor and the construction methods were kept extremely basic so that anybody could actually do it. And that was the aim, that the people could make their homes themselves with the help of their community. So all the methods, all the tools that were used were extremely basic. I think the biggest heavy machinery that we had on site was the truck, which was bringing materials such as the corrugated steel that I actually mentioned. Other than that, we were using basic hand picks and shovels to do all the excavation and all other processes. So this is the final product of how actually the building turned out. You can see that, that there aren't any windows as such. Again, that was one of the reasons for that was to actually reduce the cost of construction. But the walls themselves were made in such a way to have the fenestrations within for that promoted ventilation. And even at the top, you can see that we had this opening at the top, which was actually promoting ventilation that was happening. Just a couple of more images. This is how the building looked from the inside. You can now see actually the openings and how they actually turned out. So this project actually taught us a lot, and there was I was opened up to a lot of new things in this project. While documenting this project, these are the main things that we realized that, that occurred. Number one, carbon footprint. With the processes that you saw, with the materials that were being used, you can see that, the carbon footprint was kept to an absolute minimal, actually helping sustain the ecology. Number two, skilled labor. Like I mentioned before, skilled labor was not a necessity. The people were learning on site. And again, that was the aim, that through the process, people learn, and they can actually, the process is easy enough for the knowledge to be transferred to the other people. And third is community integration, that the community itself is actually, that is developing, and you're not dependent on any state bodies or any NGOs that eventually are doing the work. So if we actually bring this example into Pakistan, what can be done? It is quite easy to be using vernacular materials which are local to our region. If you look at Sindh has its own vernacular materials, Punjab its own, and if you go up north, same is the case. And to some extent, you do see that happening as well. You go to the mountains and you will notice that most of the structures, or rather the old structures, are mostly built out of stone and wood. And the reason for that is that those materials are actually local and it is easy to move them about and use them. The second thing, construction techniques. Having a process that is simple, that is easy, can easily be implemented as well. And through this project, you can see how the local community can develop, how their skills can be developed, how that can actually help them to even progress and evolve. And last but not least, the community, developing itself. Before I end, I just want to say that, it's not as though these things aren't happening in Pakistan. We do have people that are working in their own capacities. If you look at Madam Yasmin Lari and the work that she has done against flood resistance, serving the community. Kamal Saab, working with traditional materials and traditional building techniques. And Ghayur Ubaid Saab, working with vernacular materials and technologies. All of them are doing these things individually. But now what we actually need to do is bring it together in a way that all of these things start happening together. And it is something that, even if you look at our government has had these initiatives that are helping develop the masses. For example, recently, you have these financial programs that are being developed which are giving zero interest loans for the people to develop their homes. Previously, the promise of 5 million homes was actually created so that the masses would be there. But the thing is that we should not be dependent on that sole entity. We need to develop ways that we ourselves can actually, start creating a better life for ourselves. Have ways and means where all of these things are integrated together. So you have different bodies and entities that are working together and create this environment which actually, becomes more efficient and has a deeper impact on the people, leading to economic solutions. And one thing that I would like to add to this, to the 3 E's, is actually the project actually being environmentally friendly, because Pakistan, unfortunately, has a massive issue when it comes to pollution and how these things are actually being dealt with right now. Thank you. I would like, if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Architect Awais Aqdus, for that insightful presentation.